Hello and welcome to another episode of Enter the Nerdosphere, the official podcast for the Nerdosphere, your home for everything inside the Nerdosphere, from the silver screen to the small screen, and everything in between. I'm your host, Clayton, and I'm joined, as always and forever, by my brother, Corbomb.
Hey.
Today is episode 16.
Dang.
It has been 16 episodes since we started the Nerdosphere
rebrand.
Yep.
It's not counting the 8 episodes maybe with CP and second degree.
9, 10 maybe. We had several.
Whatever that Ghostwriter episode was. It was the last one we did.
No. That was episode 7 of Nerdosphere.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're right. The last one is far beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, today we are discussing Guardians of the Galaxy. We have both seen it, of course, and we're going to go over opening weekend box office numbers. We're going to go over spoiler-free discussion over the film and what we thought. Then we will get into some spoiler areas. So if you want our opinion in general about the film, you can listen to most of it, and then we'll get into some spoiler stuff, and we'll warn you if you don't want anything spoiled, so you can dip and then come back after you've seen the movie. All right, so as usual, we will jump right into opening weekend box office numbers. This week, we're going to compare them to other Marvel movies, because it didn't break any super records or anything.
It did break the highest Thursday debut of this year. That's not saying a whole lot.
Yeah, it's not saying a whole lot. But
Beauty and the Beast
that's
was
one of
a
those
colossal...
things where it's like they're trying to tag on awards
Right.
like everybody. So
It's like, who
they
broke
didn't
a
do
record?
anything that significant. So we're just going to compare it to other Marvel movies so far. So it comes in at number 5 Marvel opening weekend. Overall, it made $146.5 million. It comes behind Marvel's Avengers, Marvel's Age of Ultron, Civil War, and Iron Man 3. So,
I hate that movie.
yeah, no, me too. So, number 5 overall for opening weekend, which is pretty good because there's a lot of Marvel movies out now.
Yeah.
So,
When Infinity War comes out, that will be number 20.
yeah,
20 years and 10 years.
it's pretty awesome. Now let's get into the tomato meter and the Metacritic score as usual when we do these kinds of analytical podcast review thingies.
I give you, our view along with the average.
The tomato meter is at 81%. That's a 7.1 out of 10 average rating from 276 reviews. We got 226 fresh reviews and 52 rotten. So, yeah, anyways. Audience score is at 90%. No surprise there. Guardians are very popular. The Metascore is usually... I want to say Metascore is usually a little bit more accurate. It's always on the lower side compared to Tomato Meter. Both on the critics and the users. They're a little bit harder on things over there. So Metacritic score is 67 out of 100, which is, that's not quite passing.
Right.
So user score is 8.1 out of 10. So, again, people really like their Guardians. So...
we'll get into our opinions.
Yeah, we'll get into our opinions and talk about whether that's valid or not. Let's jump into what you like talking about most, which is music.
Yeah, so the Guardians films are an interesting one when talking about music because obviously they have the composer Tyler Bates who did both of the films. But they rely very heavily on tone and aesthetic with the song choices that James Gunn chooses for
The awesome mixes.
The awesome mixes. So you have a two-parter. You have the song choices that James Gunn chose for the awesome mixes, and then you have Tyler Bates as a composer. Tyler Bates obviously reiterates the main theme that he did with the first one, the dun 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 dun. So I enjoyed it for the most part. It's a little bit boring when you listen to the score by itself. I was particularly intrigued by a song called Father. James Gunn had mentioned that he had cried when he had heard it, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll go and listen to it. And I was kind of like, the best song on the score is Showtime A-Holes, and it's the first song that plays, and it's basically just the theme of the Guardians,
Right?
as it leads into the Obelisk battle. As far as the song choices for Awesome Mix Volume 2, I will say when I originally heard them, I wasn't quite on board. But now that I've seen the movie and I have kind of like moments attached to those songs, I kind of like it more. It's as far as emotions go, it has more ups and downs, whereas Volume Mix was very much like high amps, like very positive. This one has, like more somber things like Lakeshore Drive, but it also has like Mr. Blue Sky and Brandy from Looking Glass. So I don't know. I think that there's a wider selection on Volume 2, and I really, really enjoyed it. Again, Tyler Bates kind of bored me, but he kind of gets a little bit of a pass on this one because the forefront is
Yeah, I was gonna say,
songs.
I think that's intentional. If I would give my opinion, because the movie does rely so heavily on those songs. So if you had, excuse me, if you had a score that was overshadowing those songs, which is kind of the essence of this Guardians of Galaxy.
So yeah, I mean, one quick side note on Tyler Bates too that I thought was interesting was for at least these two Guardian movies, he wrote the scores based on the script, which typically the movie, films, and then the composer is lining up the tracks and stuff to the movies as he composes it. So James Gunn had the songs playing on set while they were filming the scenes, so the actors had a reference for the tone and stuff. So I think that's a cool method.
Cool. Yeah,
it's different. It just didn't blow me away, but like you said, it's probably intentional.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's intentional. Of course, I agree. I said it.
Of course, you agree. You said it.
So we've talked about music a little bit. Now we can get into general thoughts, and this, of course, will be spoiler free. So don't fret yet. You're gonna get our opinion, and then we'll warn you here in a little bit. So let's just get right into story development without getting into any specifics. How'd you feel about the way the story played out?
Well, going into the movie, I knew from James Gunn that he wanted to take a step back from the spectacle and make it more character driven.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there was some unnecessary backpedaling and retreading of old territory. So I kind of felt like as we did a deeper dive into the characters, we kind of rehashed stuff we already knew about.
We can get into specifics.
Yeah. So I kind of enjoyed some more intimate moments, but I don't know. I was kind of left feeling a little not whelmed.
I was whelmed.
I think that the 7 area out of 10 is accurate.
I agree
with the movie. Yeah. I think all the actors did a great job with the characters that are given. We are given more things with Nebula and Gamora that I really appreciated. We get to see stuff with Ego and Star-Lord, which I really appreciated getting to know.
Even a little bit more insight into Rocket. I mean, it's...
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. I'm on par with you. I won't rehash anything you just said, but I don't have any different thoughts for that. So, character development, we kind of touched on that a little bit. I feel like there's definitely more character development in this film than there was in the original.
Right.
Because the original, as you mentioned, was more about the overarching story rather than the... I mean, we did get some, we got some team building and some relationships developed, but it wasn't like... This one's definitely more fleshed out. So
I will say the second time I saw the movie, after I had some time to calm down from the hype and stuff, every time a new character came on screen and they did some character explanation, I started to see this pattern of a character would come on screen and be like, I remember this is where I came from, this is my story, and then another character would come on screen and was like, this is my story, this is where I came from, and I kind of started chuckling at it a little bit. and we can talk about it more when we get into specifics, but I was kind of like, they're explaining a lot in this movie.
I guess I'm not really remembering or thinking about what you're talking about, so we'll have to talk about that. Entertainment. So what entertainment value did it have? I think action was good. Comedy was good, but they definitely went above and beyond with this one. And I think it was almost maybe a little too much.
So for me, I kind of felt like it was late 90s, early 2000s sequel fever, where you take what worked in the first one and you just put it on steroids, and then you just shotgun humor, everything. So there are things that landed, there are things that didn't land, and things that didn't land, I was like, ugh. For me, my biggest gripe with the Guardians movies compared to other Marvel films is the action. I never feel like there's really cool stylized action in these films. They're just kind of like floating around firing guns, which you can say is their thing. But also, like, people like Gamora and Nebula are trained by Thanos to be like essentially the best fighters in the foreseeable galaxy because Thanos trained them. Mm-hmm. And we never really get to see them show their stuff. And I almost feel like something that maybe James Gunn, going into the third one, can take note of what Joss did with Avengers, is say you have a team of eclectic people and they each have their strengths and weaknesses. How can they play off of each other when the going gets tough and when they get back into a corner, to have just like a really unique eye-popping scenario?
Right.
So that was probably the thing that, again, with sequels you expect more and you want more. And that's not to say that it's not good. It's just realizing that there was some missed opportunity for maybe something really cool. And the thing that I thought of the most was Gamora and Nebula. Like, Nebula didn't do anything, but she should be able to do a lot of stuff.
I don't think there was anything really for her to do in this story, though.
True. And I think she was more there for the emotional weight, which, was good.
Okay. So entertainment would lead us naturally into Baby Groot. I think we can...
Baby Groot.
Everyone's seen enough of him to where we can, I think, pretty openly talk about him.
Yeah.
So he was definitely cute on steroids. I enjoyed most everything that he was in the movie. However, there was a point towards the end where I was like, what am I watching? What is this right now? Is this just the Baby Groot movie right now?
Yeah, so with the humor, I felt like even the things that stuck, it always just seemed to go on just too long.
Yeah,
like,
it went on just
a little too long. Like,
and I almost
stopped it.
Like, I really love Baby Groot, and I'm not gonna say what I just said all over again, but it almost went on just a little bit too long every time.
Yeah, I was like,
every time.
The only one that didn't was when he was trying to find the thing.
Yes,
that was the one where I was like, this could go on all day.
Yeah, that was amazing.
But yeah, that was, and that seems to be pretty consistent when I talk to people. They were like, it was funny. It just went on. It just too long. Like, understanding like where that fine line is. I think you know.
Yeah.
So some things work, some things don't. But
yeah,
he was adorable.
He was adorable. Okay, we touched on it, but let's talk a little bit more about it. Emotions in this film. I personally think that the opening scene in Guardians 1 where he loses his mom always really gets me. I don't know why, but I always
thought she looked weird.
Well, she's dying from flipping.
She was like an alien, and she's like, "My father's bathed in starlight," and I was like, "You look like you're from the stars, lady."
Gosh. But this one was definitely, as we've said already, full of more character development, more intimate situations, and I feel like the emotion that came with that was on point, and I enjoyed a lot of the emotional roller coaster that he took us through, James Gunn.
Yeah, he made us care about characters that when you leave the first one you didn't really have feelings about, or if you did, they were kind of like, ugh. So there were some great payoffs in this movie, and I will say that, while certain things didn't click with the script and stuff, tip your hat where it's due. And he did a lot with some characters that I didn't expect, and I didn't expect to care about leaving this movie. And I was like, dang, I just had a tear about that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I completely agree. So let's walk away from this general discussion with a couple questions.
Sure.
And that I just wrote these down. Does it live up to the original? And then, along with that, did it live up to the hype? So I'll go first.
Okay.
I don't think it lived up to the original because still to this day, the original is tied with Winter Soldier for my favorite Marvel film.
Okay.
Those are my two number ones. So it was good, but it did not, for me, live up to the original. Thus, not living up to the hype. Those questions kind of go hand in hand, but
they do. But they do differ a little bit. You can expand, So I would say, while I would not say it's tied for me with Winter Soldier is my favorite Marvel film as well. While I would say it does, mine's not tied with Winter Soldier, but it's in my tier 1. We've said a few times that the way that we rank Marvel movies are in tiers, and we're gonna do a movie. We're gonna do
we're gonna do an entire documentary.
We're gonna do an episode of our. A lot of people like to make lists and stuff. We're gonna give you our version of the MCU, and it is done in tiers, not rankings, because it's
there's too many good ones. Because there's too many great ones. There's too many really good ones to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like.
Right.
Yeah.
So Guardians 1, yes, is in my number 1. It was lightning, baby. I mean, James Gunn took, in my opinion, a comic book series that I thought was just utter trash, and he just breathed this life into it. Obviously the characters aren't quite what they were in the comics. It's his version of them. But it came out of nowhere. It was one of the movies that, we were like, why is Marvel doing this? This is a mistake. This is a mistake,
we had
Marvel.
Conversations about it.
But it wasn't. It ended up being a home run. Ended up being one of their best films. So, there's a lot of weight when you make a sequel to that. I mean, it is a phenomenal... It just wasn't there. So, you have movies like... For me, it was like Iron Man 2 to Iron Man, where, it hits on some things where you're like, yeah, I like that, but it just wasn't...
For me, it's Iron Man 2 to Iron Man 3, because I liked Iron Man 2.
I liked it too, I just didn't like it more than the first one.
I would disagree. The first one, I enjoyed it the first time. It bores me every time I watch it now.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I can't sit through it. If it's on TV, because it used to be on FX all the time, I would change the channel.
Really? Interesting.
But I'm also not a huge fan of rewatching origin stories over and over again.
That's a good point. So there's something to be said there. Whereas Guardians 1 doesn't quite feel like an origin story because they use the MacGuffin method of propelling the characters forward and stuff.
Yes, they do. As far as... I had a point about hype that I wanted to tie in, and now I've lost it. So I guess keep going.
So, no, I don't think that it lives up to the original because
Keep going, but I remember now.
I don't think that it was ever going to because it was just so good.
I agree. There's some things like The Last Jedi will not live up to the same hype as the original. There's no way. It's not to say it won't be tingly good, but no way. So,
and it's the opposite. Whereas Winter Soldier, all it had to compete with was the first Avenger, which
was just a mediocre. I mean, it's okay.
Yeah, but okay. I mean, come on, it's one of their worst. If we're to but anyways, so no, I don't think it lives up to the hype because the hype was so big for this one.
It was. One thing I want to say that ties into our hype discussion currently. James Gunn has been getting mad praise all over Twitter from Kevin Smith, other actors, fans, other people with blue check marks that I don't know who they are.
Who aren't just faceless eggs.
Right. And I just don't quite get that. They were like I remember before we could even go see it, one dude with a blue check mark, I don't even know who he was, but he's got a blue check mark, so he's somebody. He's somebody somewhere. Says, saw it for the second time, you're a master or something. It's like
it was this,
everybody's just and that just added to this hype, and then you go see it and it's it's a good movie, but my goodness, I fear that James Gunn is going to hear all of this. And just be like, just go even further, and you need to rein in a couple things and like polish a couple other things and just deliver like a really good volume 3.
Because it wasn't a masterpiece. And volume 3, if it's going to conclude this iteration to imply that it's going to have a changing roster, it really needs to, like, I need it to be a home run. It's like, I love these characters. And I was talking to my wife about, if any of these characters were to leave, I think a couple of them that would be the saddest to see go would be particularly Rocket. I think Rocket would be, like, I could even...
I would honestly doubt that Rocket goes away.
Yeah.
Rocket, like, I think Rocket and Groot have held... Well, I mean, I guess they could go off and do their own thing, because don't they have their own comic now?
They have their own team-up comic. So I really need the next one to just be a home run. And, you know, I can't... The spoiler version, we'll get into where we think it could go with how they left things. But James Gunn, I need Volume 3 to be better than Volume 2.
Yeah.
Not to say that Volume 2 was bad. It was great. But
so, closing thoughts before we get into spoiler territory.
It is definitely worth your time. It might be worth your time a couple times, but it is not better than the first movie. The 7 out of 10 area is astute and accurate. I would say probably 7.7 if I'm going to just pull a number out of the air to convey my emotions. It's solid, but just go in knowing that some jokes are going to make you cringe. And Drax is not the same character.
Drax is not the same character, and we'll get into that here in a minute, because that was one of the first things I said when we got out of the theater, was that Drax is not the same character. I echo everything you just said. It
Cool.
it is worth your time. Definitely go see it. It's another quality Marvel film, so it's worth your time, but dial down your hype a little bit.
I agree.
So, all right. Let's get into spoiler-free territory.
Spoiler.
First thing I want to talk about, actually, let's go out of order a little bit since you mentioned Drax already. Let's just hit Drax, like, right now. Again, this is spoiler territory. If you don't want anything ruined, click away now, because we're going to get into specifics. If you don't care, go ahead and listen, or you can come back after you've seen the film and listen to us discuss it a little bit more. Drax. So we went from the first movie. Drax's like thing was he's this warrior who lost his family, but his species like conveys emotions like completely different. They're stoic,
they're super literal,
they're super literal. Like that's where the humor came from with Drax, was like that he is super literal. He doesn't understand metaphors. He doesn't understand sarcasm.
Anything you say will go over his head. Nothing goes over my head.
Exactly.
My reflexes are too quick. I catch it.
In this movie, there was none of that. None of it. And he was actually just making jokes. So, I mean, I don't know if you would want to go as far as to say, like, his time with the Guardians has, like, evolved his, like, personality and stuff. But I would say that...
But not enough time has passed. Like, this is supposed to be months after.
And they made a point to say that that's a trait of his species. Mm-hmm. So he wouldn't... If that's a trait of his species, to not even be able to grasp a metaphor, I really don't think that he would make that progress, if any progress ever.
Dave Bautista even said that when he initially read the script, he was like, this is not where I thought Drax was going to go. And he actually didn't think it was funny. It wasn't until the table read that he saw some jokes interacting with other people that he was like, okay, I'm more on board, and had a little bit more fun with it.
Right.
But initially when he read the script, he was like, he said that he was worried. He was disappointed.
And I'm right there with him. Because
he's a good casting. I mean,
he's good casting. I really enjoyed what Drax was, and they completely changed him. So,
and he
went from being the butt of every joke, and that's what was funny,
right,
to like almost maliciously making jokes. Like he was always like laughing at somebody or making fun of somebody, like. And I mean, I guess you could argue that like his saying what's her face was ugly and it's like what's Mantis. On it. Like you could argue that maybe that's like taking things literal or something, just like saying what's on his mind no matter what. But I don't think so. It wasn't the same. It didn't feel the same. Yeah. So that for me was my biggest disappointment, I think.
Yeah, especially, and we didn't get a whole lot more to his character, so we got more humor, and we kind of just retread more on his his daughter being murdered and stuff. And so One thing we did get to see is through Mantis, we get to see actual emotions. When he's talking about his daughter, she cries. That's a powerful moment.
I was getting ready to say, one thing I did like was when Mantis touched him and like she just got overwhelmed with sadness, and that was a good moment.
But with that comes the inconsistency of the character. Of you get a little bit of James Gunn making it his like personal passion to keep Thanos out of this movie, but Drax ending the first one saying, "I've killed Ronan. I'm not satisfied on taking revenge for my wife and daughter. Thanos is the next to go." In this movie, he just doesn't talk about it hardly at all. It just seems strange that that's where his character ends.
It is strange that he doesn't talk about it, but I didn't get as hung up on it as you, because this movie wasn't about that. He now views the Guardians as his new family, so he's with them no matter what, and they're not going after Thanos right now. So it didn't even cross my mind until you mentioned it, and I don't quite agree.
Okay, I mean that's fine. We're not here to agree on everything.
Right? Yeah.
We're here to just give our collective opinions. So yeah, I mean Drax was disappointing for sure.
He was disappointing. There were a few good moments, and I did laugh at some of his stuff, but it wasn't the same Drax.
No.
And I prefer the first Drax to the second Drax, and I hope they go back a little bit.
No.
So, all right, let's talk about one of those characters we thought we would never care about, but we actually care about a lot, and
Yondu.
Walk away super disappointed that we don't get to see any more of.
Yeah, Michael Rooker knocked it out of the park with a character I never thought I would ever care about. You leave Guardians 1 being like he's kind of a jackass. He's just like this minor supportive character. Actually, to say supporting character would be a little bit minimal.
Yeah.
He comes guns a-blazing in this movie, being one of the main screen...
Oh, yeah, he's one of the main characters for sure.
Yeah, like holding probably more screen time than even like Drax. Like he holds a lot of screen time and a lot of dialogue in this movie.
Yeah.
We get more of his backstory. So when the movie opens, when we finally go to Yondu's character, they're on a planet, there's some robotic brothel, and there's an interaction with Sylvester Stallone's character, who is Starhawk, who in the comics is the leader of the original Guardians of the Galaxy, who Yondu was also a member of.
Mm-hmm.
And we get the backstory of Yondu's team of Ravagers is one of 100 clans of Ravagers, but his particular clan has been outcasted and shunned because of Yondu's dealing with the children. That he was hired by Ego. Obviously, when Yondu found out what was going on, he stopped and saved Peter.
But it was too late. He'd already...
Right. So we get a little bit more depth in where he's coming from. He feels like an outsider. Man.
He does a great job.
He does a great job. We get kind of the father under your nose, but we didn't quite understand it the whole time with Peter Quill and Yondu towards the end of the movie. He sacrifices himself. He dies. We're never going to see him again, which is super sad.
It is super sad.
And if there's one thing that you can pull away from this movie is we need to be paying more attention to Michael Rooker. He needs to be in stuff. He's good.
Yeah, he's really good. He was good in Walking Dead, and he's good in this, and he needs to be in more things because I really like him. So, but yeah, he there, especially towards the end when it all just comes together, man.
And while I said I had issues with the action, some of the best action actually came from Yondu and his
little spear.
His little
whistle needle.
Which, when you pay attention to his character, that's why he's always sharpening his teeth. It's so that he can whistle the way that he does.
Good point.
I picked that up the second time I watched it. I was really I had just noticed, and I was like, that's why he's always picking his teeth and sharpening his teeth.
That's a good point. So yeah, definitely, James Gunn definitely made me care about him for sure. And it was sad at the end. Especially
since his casting in particular and that character being in the movie was actually to do his friend a favor. So Michael Rooker has been in almost all of James Gunn's films.
James Gunn said that he wrote that part for him.
Like the first Guardians.
Yeah, like that version of Yondu is Michael Rooker.
Right.
So, man.
But gives us consequences and collateral damage in a Marvel movie, which we aren't used to really getting.
We get rarely.
You can't really have a main character dying, but a main supportive character that you always think is going to be safe, having him die. Quicksilver. Gone too soon. Moment of silence.
I'll be honest, up until the moment that they put him into the engine to be vaporized into space, I thought he was going to wake up. I seriously did. Like, it was really emotional, like, Star-Lord just like, no, and he's like dying, and then like he's like laying down in the coffin, and I was like, he's gonna all of a sudden just like wake up and be like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
But he didn't.
No.
So
probably the other two characters that I would want to jump to next is the Gamora and Nebula dynamic.
Okay.
For me, Nebula is also one of those things where my issue with Gamora is her relationship with Peter Quill and the total backpedal that they did. So the first film ends with them kind of like, oh yeah, they're going to get together. They're totally into each other. And this movie starts with you thinking that they got together, maybe ended it.
We're talking about Gamora?
Gamora.
Okay. You either said Nebula or I was thinking Nebula.
I said Gamora.
And I wasn't following you, so
Sure.
I'm with you now.
Okay. So my issue with Gamora was that we did this whole backpedal. This movie starts with the feeling that they must have gotten together and something went bad, and they're kind of like awkward around each other. But that's not what happened at all. It's almost like everything that happened in the first movie didn't happen, and they're back to square one. And I had a lot of issues with that. But her interactions with Nebula, I thought were dynamite. We get to actually see where Nebula is coming from as a quote-unquote villain. Mm-hmm. And just what that relationship was with Thanos. So Thanos pits, Gamora and Nebula against each other and says, the loser of this battle, I'm going to augment because I want to just have, like, the best fighters in the galaxy.
Yeah.
And Gamora just always went after the win because, her life was at stake, too.
Yeah.
But Nebula's
always won.
Right. But so Nebula's coming from a perspective of, like, I just wanted a sister. And it was kind of touching. But she was like, Thanos ripped my arm off. Thanos ripped my eye out. Like, all these horrific things. So she has this, like, burning hatred for Gamora because of that. Mm-hmm. It was really cool to just see that perspective. Yeah. And it'll make watching the first one cooler. So if you're going to do something right in a sequel, it's to add a certain amount of depth that allows the rewatching of even a previous film that much more enriching.
More impactful, more meaningful.
So I loved that dynamic. It was one of the things I walked away with the happiest about.
I completely concur. I have nothing else to add to that. Except I wasn't miffed as much about Gamora and Peter. It didn't bother me so much. Because they already kind of had an awkwardness. And yeah, you assumed that they would get together, but it wasn't. They didn't get together. And so if you assume that they didn't get together and then this continual feeling grew between both of them, but neither one of them acted on it, then yeah, it would become awkward. And so it didn't bother me so much.
Okay. Ego.
Yeah, let's do Ego.
So the movie starts off in 1980, Missouri. Shout out to Missouri. Thanks, James Gunn, being a child of St. Louis.
St. Louis and
it starts off with
we're from St. Louis. If you ever want to be on our podcast,
yeah, you're right. Yeah, we are. Or just like give us a shout out. That'd be cool too, right?
Yeah.
So it starts in 1980 with Ego and Peter Quill's mom driving around with what we thought was a flawless CGI facelift. Come to find out,
it was all practical.
It was makeup.
Yeah.
Which blew my mind. And when I saw it the second time and I knew that, I was like, oh, okay. I see it now. But it's funny because even on Kind of Funny, Tim Geddes and Nick Shapiro talked about how they didn't think it was that great. Nick Shapiro commented on how far it's come, but Tim Geddes said it took him out of the movie because it was so bad.
And it's not even.
Not even facelift.
You should have tweeted him.
I should have.
You should have tweeted him.
But to say that, I guess it was so good and so jarring that people probably just assume that's what it was. So that's a testament of just the makeup artists in general.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the fact that that wasn't a facelift. That was actually makeup. But so Ego. Kurt Russell does a great job with Ego.
He does.
He comes into the movie. You really kind of want to be on his side.
He plays the crazy god, like To a T.
Yeah. You want to be on his side. I think going into the movie, obviously the marketing makes you believe that the Sovereign and Aisha, who's the high priestess of the Sovereign, are going to be the main villains of the movie. And when you're watching the movie, you see the plot in the background propelling forward, that they want to go after the Guardians to disable the batteries and stuff. Also, a quick note, IGN in their reviews on their top 5 questions for why, or top 5 questions they have after leaving Guardians, number 1 was, why would the Sovereign hire the Guardians after they clearly have the means to take care of stuff themselves? Well, if you watch the movie, IGN, which I guess you don't when you watch movies, they actually very plainly say it when the Guardians go before the High Priestess and she thanks them for their service, and then states that their complete perfection, they don't want to battle. The reason why they hired the Guardians is because they're too perfect that it's below them.
Yeah.
So you can thank me. You can mark that off your list. It's okay.
Yeah, aren't they the ones who made like some stupid Star Wars questions list? And I was like, what are you even talking about right now?
They did. We're going to war. Just you wait. It's coming.
We going after IGN. I'm coming after you, 4.5 King Arthur. Don't you 4.5 King Arthur? There's no way. Anyways.
Foreshadow for a future episode. So you think that the Sovereign's going to be the big bad. And you always are probably a little suspicious of Ego anyways, because he's the big, powerful person. Mm-hmm. So he ends up being the baddie, and I'm not going to say that necessarily was a total twist in of itself. But he plays the part well of, like, you wanting to be voting for him. Like, he's very likable. Mm-hmm. He is fulfilling, Peter's, the father figure that he wants to do. He also... Every great villain comes from a perspective of doing what they think is the right thing, right? So even when we get the twist of things, he still, I think in a sick, twisted way, still cared about Peter. Like, he was ultimately using Peter for himself to accomplish his goal. But I never left that movie thinking that he was just a tool. Like, I do think that he cared about Peter in his own way.
I completely agree, because you could definitely tell with Kurt Russell's performance that he was disappointed when Peter didn't want to help, and because he was like, what did he yell? We have to spend eternity with each other. Mm-hmm. So, I agree with you. And
even like when he speared him, he said, "I guess you'll have to spend the next couple 1,000 years as a battery until you come around." Like, it was almost like a dad putting his son in timeout. Like, he never did not care for him. Like, he got what he accomplished, which was his seed being spread into another living host to help him. But it very much was from, like, together, father and son will rule the galaxy. Like, yeah. It was completely out of love, and he didn't want to kill Peter. I think at any moment he could have tried to actually kill Peter if he really wanted to.
But he didn't. Yeah, I agree.
So I think it was, and Kurt Russell, it never plays a villain. It was kind of cool to see him play the villain.
It was, yeah.
So, I don't know. Ego was a good job. Ego is also another example of James Gunn taking a character who's stupid and giving him new life. Ego in the comics is ridiculous. Yeah. He is only a living planet.
Right, yeah.
And he was not related to Peter Quill, because this movie completely was 100% original. Yeah. Using stock characters, which would be interesting to see if Marvel does in the future.
Yeah, Peter's real dad is the son of one of the emperors of one of the space empires. There's like 4 or 5 of them or something. Yeah. I was just reading it earlier and I can't remember a dang thing about it
because the cosmic world of Marvel is so bad.
It's so boring.
So that allows us to lead into
the big twist of the movie.
The one that actually it made my jaw drop. I was like,
it hit me hard, and especially so let's just get into it. So Peter's drinking the Kool-Aid.
He's been shown. His eyes have been open.
His eyes have been open. He's got space in his eyes, literally. And he's like, I'm going to help my dad save the galaxy. And then his dad lets slip, I really did love your mom. That's why I had to put, if I had gone back another time, I would have stayed. So I had to put that brain tumor in her. And Peter Quill flips out.
He snaps
comes right back. Pulls out his guns and just like blows him away, that body away.
Which I loved the reaction time. Because they could have, in a movie where they overdid everything,
They
that
could
was
have
something
drawn
that
it out.
They could have drawn it out and made it more.
He could have been like, "What did you say?"
That was something that was on the
what? But
Boom.
no, it was like, and Chris Pratt really showed off some acting chops there because I just watching his body language, I felt it. I felt it
because there was a couple times leading up to that. Where he's talking to Ego, he's like, "Why did you leave her?" And you are getting that sense of like,
there's something more.
there's not only was there something more, but Chris Pratt, was like a 10-year-old when the thing happened with his mom. So he very much was mature enough in his mind to feel like I was the man of the house. It was just me and my mom, and I had to watch her die alone. You know what I mean? Like
and you
he
weren't
had all
there.
of that like man of the house, like where were you? Kind of, like mentality. So to hear that he's the reason why she died, like man, it really paid off.
Well, the death of his mom defines Peter Quill's character.
Yeah.
So like it gave me goosebumps in there. So
it was brilliant. I loved it.
I did too. It was probably the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, most of the points we wanted to talk about. We've kind of already talked about. Well, no, we can go into. Does it break the Marvel villain issue? This is one of your points, and I'll let you talk about it because I want to see where you're going with that.
So the Marvel villain issue is that Marvel villains never feel fleshed out. That they always kind of feel throwaway. They don't really matter a whole lot. It's just a plot device.
Okay.
They always die. There's never any meaning to them. I think with this movie,
Except for Baron Zemo, who's not Baron Zemo yet, but
right, which means they've got big plans for him. The fact that he's the only one to live.
Yeah,
he's the only one to live.
I would bet money that at some point Ultron comes back.
That would be really cool.
Because he always does, no matter how destroyed he gets, he always comes back.
Comicmovie.com did a list of villains they would like to see in Volume 3, and Ultron was one that they talked about. It'd be cool to see. There's some tech race out in the cosmic universe, and this is how cool it'd be if he shot his intelligence out and took over that race, and so they would give the Guardians throwaway villains to attack and this, that, and the other. So I think it does and it doesn't solve the issue. We still have the issue of
it solves the issue of a meaningful villain.
True.
He's got depth. We were attached to him. You could even see his side and sympathize with him. And
the interaction with him will change the Guardians.
Yeah.
I think that's what viewers want. I don't necessarily think they want, although it's nice to see villains not die because you have the potential of them coming back in a future story arc. And you shouldn't burn through all of your villains. I think is an important thing to keep in mind as we're using our iconic characters first and getting to the nuanced characters.
But they need to have more meaning than just propelling the story. They have to have a meaningful impact on the characters.
Right. It wasn't obviously Robert Redford's character in Winter Soldier. We could spot that a mile away, and he spoiled it. He said it from the very beginning. But the way it was marketed, you knew who he was going to be. But Hydra and everything, that shaped everything. And that was although he was the main villain, Hydra as a villain, it gave meaning, gave depth.
Yeah.
And the Guardians are leaving this movie different than they entered this movie, and it's because of their experience with Ego.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we got a great villain. And the background villain, who was the Sovereign, we're going to see again. Not only that, I really enjoy the Sovereign. I actually kind of wish we could have seen more of them because I thought that they were kind of funny when they were on screen, and the way that their drones were an 80s arcade was it was just hysterical. But Aisha, who's the High Priestess, in one of the final end credit scenes, is creating Adam Warlock in his cocoon.
Who's a very significant character.
Especially for the Infinity Gauntlets. He's also very closely tethered with the Soul Gem. So while James Gunn and Kevin Feige says that Adam Warlock is being saved for Volume 3 and he will not be in Avengers Infinity War, I call shenanigans. There ain't no way. He's not going to be in one of those two movies.
I agree. I don't feel like Kevin Feige's ever outright said something that's not been true to throw off the fan base, though. Is the only thing that makes
I'm
me
sure we
pause
could find
on
a
that.
quote about the Mandarin.
Think so?
Maybe.
It might be worth looking into. What do we want from a sequel?
So we kind of touched about it in the spoiler-free version.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be a home run.
It
It
does.
needs to conclude these characters in a very satisfying
He
manner.
cannot continue to. You can't take what works from this movie and put it on steroids because it's already on steroids from the first one. So, take a step back and breathe.
Understand that the viewers are intelligent, and I can see kind of where you're going. We all know that Adam Warlock is going to end up being a hero.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to find a way of going into already tread waters of having a villain be a villain in the first act, and by the third act he's fighting with the heroes. Like, you need to find a way of making that feel fresh and not convoluted.
Yeah.
And I kind of said this in spoiler free version too. I want better action. I don't want them just on a jetpack firing guns. If you're gonna fire guns, make it look cooler. Like,
I don't know. I think that's James. I think that's just a difference in director. I think that's just James Gunn's style, and I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I walked out not satisfied by the action.
Well, and that's why we're here.
And I know you compared him to Joss Whedon in in the way he films focuses on what everybody can individually do and how they can team up and do things like together. But I just think that's just different filmmakers' takes on
it is,
things,
but
so.
again, I think the best example I can make is like Gamora, who Peter Quill jokingly says her thing is swords. We see it twice. We see it in the very opening scene with the obelisk where she splits it open, and when she cuts off the flowers, and that's it. And you could have, especially in that final climax scene with even the Sovereign and Ego, you could have had a really cool action sequence with Gamora and Nebula, and we just didn't get that. And there's a lot
I
of
still
potential.
think that I think that that's more choices made for story because we had already gotten Gamora and her fighting, and we got to see some of Gamora's strengths fighting Nebula. And at the point of the climax, we're focusing more on Peter Quill and Ego. So while I understand where you're coming from, I feel like the choices were made for the story, not necessarily for action.
I think this is one of the rare cases that I might say the story was too focused. Only because there were a lot of scenes where, like, Drax was on screen. He was like explaining where he came from. Then Yondu was on screen. He was in the cell with Rocket Raccoon. He was talking about where he came from, and like these are things that we either already knew kind of, or things we didn't need to know. Like, I think one of the things that really worked with Guardians 1 was it gave us just enough to know about the characters and then fire away. But we didn't need to go like deep diving into each individual character. I think you could have just let them speak for themselves in the experience, and I just think it could have been that time that was used could have been used for something else. I don't know. That's just me. The second time I saw it, those moments stuck out more, and they seemed longer than they did the first time. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't care.
Yeah. But you already knew at that point.
I mean, it's true. I mean, that's, you get a different perspective the second time that you watch.
Yeah.
Also, Sean Gunn, his brother, had way too much screen time.
I agree with you there.
I was like, this is, like, to the point where I was like, this is weird.
Yeah. The only way it'll pay off is if he really is like the new Yondu in the next one. Like,
yeah.
He really gets the fin working. And
also, something else I want from a sequel in the next one, the only exposure we've had to the Kree is the first film, and the Kree is a very imposing force. I'm sure we're gonna see more of them as they expand the cosmic universe, but I've been itching for it. I want more of the Kree. Like, give me more.
Yeah. Yeah. Eventually, yeah. I didn't need it in this movie. And,
I mean, no.
But from a sequel, yeah, maybe.
For sure.
Depends on what they want to do with Adam Warlock.
Yeah, that's true. I'm interested in seeing, like, maybe the original Guardians, which was a post-credit stinger, like Sylvester Stallone and the other captains teamed up. Maybe they team up with these Guardians in the next movie to some capacity in the third act.
Yeah, maybe.
Or maybe they're grooming them to have their... I don't know if they could support a film on their own, but I don't know.
They might be able to. They made Guardians of the Galaxy one of the most popular things around, so...
It's true. And then also, one final question as we end this. with Volume 3 almost guaranteeing the end of James Gunn writing and directing the Guardian films, but we know, assuming Guardians will continue without him and with a different roster, do you have faith that someone else can step into the shoes and it not be gimmicky? Because he's set a very specific tone.
He has, but Marvel has shown that they always pick the right person for the job. So I don't have any qualms with someone else taking up the mantle.
I wasn't bringing up the question necessarily as a position of doubt, but it was something that popped in my head, and I was like, this is something that should be, it's an interesting question. Do you have faith?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Cool. So it was a solid film, all in all.
Solid film. I think that does it.
Thank you for stopping by and listening to our latest episode of Enter the Nerdosphere as we reviewed Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. The next few episodes that you will see coming from us is a diversity for diversity's sake in the realm of video games, movie, and TV. Mm-hmm. We also have a little shout out about King Arthur that's going to be coming your way pretty soon, so be ever mindful or watchful as we put that out this coming week. Mm-hmm. And as always, if you like this video, give us a like, give us a comment, give us a subscription. What did you think of Guardians of the Galaxy? Do you disagree with anything that we said, or did we miss something? Like, the fact that Peter Quill said, I see eternity, and that's actually an Easter egg for the entire MCU universe. Is actually an entity called Eternity. It's a very bizarre thing, but the cosmic universe is filled with all sorts of strange things that just probably should never be talked about in the MCU films. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. You can also follow us on iTunes, Podbean, a couple other different areas, and all the links are going to be listed below in the description. As always, we'll see you next time.